Hello and welcome to AM Guitar with me, Anjay. Today I'm going to be looking at this pedal board, but specifically the Amp Academy from NUX. Now, first of all, massive thanks to NUX for sending this out. The Amp Academy is an all-in-one recording solution. It has an amp simulator, a cab IR loader, it has reverb, it has boosts, multiple channels, multiple save slots, all sorts of things going on. It also has an XLR out, it has a USB out, it has a direct out, it has a cab out. Again, all sorts of interesting things, and it's sort of designed to take on the likes of the Strymon Iridium, but obviously at a much lower price point. That's about £180. So what I thought I'd do is, rather than doing a review, here's the review. It's awesome, it is amazing value for money, and if you're looking for a direct recording system or a direct to PA live platform, go out and buy it. That's the review out of the way. What I'm going to do is actually show you more about how I use it. So it's now kind of on this board permanently. These pedals can swap around for reviews and things, but this is kind of my practice rig and what I would use to grab and go for a gig if I was going to play direct to a PA system, as we do in the band I'm in at the moment. So I want to kind of go through the software, which is going to appear up there in a bit. And kind of things I had to do to make it work out of the box. Because I will caveat, it's amazing. If I'm being perfectly honest, out of the box, I was not a fan. Now, however, after about 20 minutes of tweaking it, absolutely love it. So, I'm going to get myself set up, put my headphones on, grab a guitar, and just start going through the software with you. And kind of showing you some of the tones and playing with it. All right then, so we're all set up. First thing to notice on this software is it's quite a nice little layout. All of the controls respond to what you're doing on the actual pedal itself. Couple of things that I did straight off. So the first thing I did was I turned all of these volumes down because they're too high for recording and for live use. They max out everything. Hopefully that'll get adjusted in a firmware update. The next thing I did was, here's a little button that allows you to change what the scene button does. Now, each channel has 3 amps, and each amp has 3 settings with different combinations of effects and settings and that kind of stuff. And so you have this scene flick switch. There are 3 options on the flick switch, and it's mirrored on the second button on the pedal. Now, for live use, cycling through 3 can be a bit awkward. So what they've done is they've given you this scene button. So if I turn the scene button off, you can see pressing this will change me through 3 different settings. Or I can use the flick switch. If you disengage that, it means that the scene button only flicks you between 2. Now, for me, that means I can use that to turn on a reverb. And if I wanted to add something else, I've got my switch on the pedal itself to push out the third effect. So that was really useful. And the next thing I did was mess around with this effects chain. And this is why I didn't like it out of the box, because the effects chain's wrong for me. So it goes noise reduction, boost, amp, cab, equalizer, effects loop, and reverb. So your reverb and delay, which would normally be going through the effects loop, are in the wrong place. That doesn't sound bad, but for me it just didn't sound right. So the first thing I did to the effects chain was I actually moved the reverb, the effects loop, and also the noise gate in this order. So it went boost, amp, noise gate, effects loop, which would be delay in my case, going into the reverb, into the cab. So it's like having the other way around, it's like having your delay and your reverb after your speaker, whereas this is much more natural. And when I talk about effects loop, you get this little cable here that allows you to use one of the sockets at the back as an effects loop, so even cooler. So for me, this became more natural. I just preferred that tone. To me, that made kind of a massive difference to the way it worked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my kind of setup that I'm now using and just show you some of the different amps. So like I said, each channel has 3 amp options on the box, and you can flick between what each of them are. You have each amp option has 2. So your vintage can be a couple of Fenders, your classic is a couple of kind of more boutiquey ones, and your modern is a choice between a Tweed, Messer, and a Marshall of some description. Can't remember what Marshall that's meant to be. So let's just show you the differences between some of these. So let me go to, this is the one that I use, the Super Reverb. So super clean. I have on the Fenders you have like a bright switch as well, which is a really nice little feature. Then you go into the more kind of bespoke, the more kind of boutique-y type ones. So in my settings, I use the really clean on my vintage. Slightly less clean, and I'm also using a custom IR, which I'll talk about in a bit, and then slightly crunchy. But you can tell I've not messed around with much other than the vintage clean, because that's the one that I use the most, and I use that as a pedal platform. So if I now go and I turn on my overdrive, if I turn on the Plexi Ranger, so I can take that really clean Fender tone and push it all the way up to quite heavy distortion. Okay, so now if we move on to our channel B, we have a Friedman, JCM 800, dual rectifier, Solano, don't know what Uber is, and then a diesel. So let's just flick through. Again, I've not played around with these much. I have one that I use, and kind of that's really what I've stuck with. So this is the Friedman. Hang on. Turn off my other overdrives. That's quite a cool sound. And then we've got that's one that I use, JCM 800, bit of reverb in there. And then we go into slightly higher gains. So again, loads and loads and loads of really cool options with the channel B amp. Now, like I said, I mostly stick to the Marshall style amp. That's my favourite tone. So what I tend to do is I have that on as my higher gain, and then I use my overdrive to push it. But what's also really good about the higher gain ones especially is how well they respond to the volume control. So essentially they're meant to be a tube amp. So if I turn the volume right down, if I turn the gain up a little bit, it responds to the volume control the way you want a proper amp to. Now, obviously, it's not as responsive as a real tube amp, but it's not a real tube amp. It's a tiny little box that costs a lot less than a tube amp and gives you more options. So the amp models are really, really good. And the Fender and the Marshall ones, the ones that I'm using, and they sound superb, much the same as Fenders and Marshalls that I've really used. So the way I then use the platform is I then have my reverb set to the scene. So if I flip between my channels, so this is my, if I press the scene button, you'll notice the reverb comes on. And you have lots of different reverbs. So if I go onto here and I look at this, I'm using plate reverb on here. I could be using damp reverb, room, hall, plate, and spring. And obviously you can muck around with these. You start getting some quite ethereal sounds. Wow, that really is quite a lot. It also has trails. And then the other thing we've got here is boosts. So on my, if I go back to my clean channel, what you have on here is you have several different types of boosts. You have compressors, you have general boosts, and then you have distortions. So I could go for a crunch. Turn the volume right up and push the front end of the clean amp. So that would be one way of using it. Another option is if you go into the higher gain amp, what you could do is use it as a tube screamer, just to boost the front end of the amp naturally. And that's actually what I have on my third scene. So whilst the first scene flicks between just having reverb on, my third has a boost. So again, everything sounds the way you would hope it would sound with an effects unit going through it, with boosts, with overdrives. And I think the final thing is we have all these different cabs. So built in, we have these 12 cabs. I've then uploaded a few of my own. So we have Fenders, we have Boogies, we have some Magna, I can't remember what that one's based on. Magnetron, is it? The little boutique amp. Yeah, we have Marshalls in here, diesels, that kind of stuff. So you can play around with these, and they all make a difference. They all sound good as well. They're all good amps, good cab sims and good IRs. So if we go with... Let's just boost it a little bit. And if we mess around with the cab, you can hear they are all different. They all give you a different kind of output. You can tweak the high and the low cut as well, but you can also upload your own. So I have like a Rev 30 that I've got from, I think, Glenn Fricker's website. which is really good for the cleans, much less so for the distorted sounds. I think a little bit chainsawy. But the point is, you can upload your own. You don't need to do anything clever with them either. You can just upload an IR and it trims it and resamples it for the platform. So I think there's a lot going on here. I think there are things that will cause you slight issues. So using it live, there's some little idiosyncrasies. So on the pedal board, you have your channel select and you have your scene. If you press and hold the channel select, it will save the settings you currently have. So if I want a bit more gain, I can push the gain up, a bit more mids, blah, blah, blah. I could then press and hold the save button or the channel select button, and that will now save those settings to whichever scene I'm in, whichever combination of amps I'm in. As well as the bass, the middle, the presence and everything else. Bias as well, which is kind of a bit more, you don't want to mess around too much with that. It changes the gain structure. On the pedal board, you have two controls, one for boost, one for noise gate. So if I open up my boost and I play around with the first one, you can see that changes that. And if I do the same on the noise gate, you'll see I can change that with the control. If you press and hold the scene button, that then starts to control the reverb. So if I open up my reverb, it's now changing two of the settings on the reverb. So you just have to remember that you can get to all these controls, but you need to have sort of combinations of holding buttons down. But again, it does mean that live you can make tweaks and save them, so when you switch between channels and back again, you aren't losing those settings. So yeah, that is my kind of look at the NUX Amp Academy. So yeah, that's my take on the Amp Academy from NUX. Again, thank you for sending it out. I love it. I think it's got a huge amount of potential. I think one of the great things is there's a very good community on Facebook talking about their settings and how they're using it. There's also a really responsive group from NUX themselves who are actually listening to feedback. So for instance, one of the bits of feedback that I saw that came through that I agree with is when you choose a scene, flicking between your two channels changes back to scene one, and I want it to stay on the scene I was on before. Somebody mentioned that a while back. It's getting built into the next firmware release. So they are listening to the audience and saying, right, we'll make changes as we go along. I think it responds really well. I think it feels and sounds like a tube amp a lot of the time. The noise gate is a really useful addition, and I think something I'll make a lot of use of live. The chop tone IRs are superb. I think they're really good. But I love that I can upload my own as well, though, to really tweak stuff. All in all, it's a superb pedal. Out of the box, I would just plug it straight in, do some updates. I wouldn't even start playing with it if you've got the opportunity. I'd just plug in, update the firmware, get the software and start playing with it. And then just use it as you would use an amp. Put pedals in front of it, put pedals into it through the effects loop, use it as a 2-channel amp, use the reverb and play around with it and just find some settings that you really love and that match your live tone. So whenever you get an effects unit like this, it's always good to try and emulate your real kind of setup and then expand from there. So yeah, superb pedal, really love it. I say for the money, it's about £180. You're going to be hard pressed to find anything that does all of that as well as it does outside of kind of cheaper multi-effects units. And again, they are not focused on just being an amp. So yeah, if you're looking for a live straight to PA or recording solution, can't recommend the NUX Amp Academy highly enough. And I'm pointing to it on the desk, and of course you can't see it. So just one more time, let me just unplug everything and show you in all its glory with the lights on and everything. So here you go, the NUX Amp Academy. Excellent.